This is the Avatar, a graphical depiction of the player from the Ultima series of RPGs. This is also the Avatar, and so is this and this. If you were to ask an average person which of these 4 images were the best depiction of a player character, they would pick the last one. It's obviously the most advanced graphically and makes the others look very old indeed. If you were to ask an old school Ultima fan which of these were the best depiction of the Avatar, you'd get any number of answers. And I'm willing to bet that most of them wouldn't be picking the last one. Bravo, James! Clearly this proves beyond a doubt that personal preference and nostalgia can trump graphical fidelity. Golf claps all around! That much is apparent, but there's a very specific threshold that is reached in the human mind when it is given symbols to represent equivalent objects in reality, as opposed to attempts to recreate reality completely, and we're going to explore that in this video. This is a sword, as brandished by a warrior in Might and Magic 2. You cannot see the sword, so it is represented by a line of text in lieu of any graphics to depict it. This is also a sword from The Witcher 3. It's much higher fidelity and you don't need to imagine it whatsoever because it's right there in broad daylight, which is also depicted comprehensively should you look up at the sky. The beauty of that sky and the sword as you cut through monsters was a sight to behold back in the heady days of May 2015, but what it didn't take was much imagination. There isn't a large step from the fantasy swords that Geralt wields to the real swords that you'll hopefully never see arcing towards you. When you're playing a text-only adventure like Zork, it's descriptive with its details of surroundings in order to conjure an image in your mind, and when you're walking through Middlegate in Might and Magic 2, there's a handful of square EGA textures serving as a guide for where you are and what is going on around you. Nobody's gonna look at those tiles and confuse them for reality. There may be a sense of wonder for a person who's never seen a computer game before, but they'll still understand pretty swiftly that it's representational. The distance between the pixel art of the 80s and 90s and the 3D modelling of the modern era is enormous, and the latter is superior on a technical level in every single conceivable way, except for one, and that's stimulating a player's imagination. You might think that the most technically advanced graphics make player immersion complete, and that eliminating any bad textures prevents that from breaking, since there's less of a distance to go between what the player is seeing and reality itself. The problem there is the uncanny valley effect, where something approaches reality so close as to almost be reality, but misses out in some intangible way. And you might not initially spot that, but your brain did, to shamelessly quote Mike's DeClassa. With these ultra-realistic graphics, it only takes one act of bizarre physics or one thing out of alignment to completely dispel any potential player immersion. With representational pixel art and limited 3D texturing, you have a canvas that tells the mind what to paint over it, rather than the mind being told what it's seeing. You're activating your brain by letting it fill in the gaps, and because it's easier to maintain that level of graphical fidelity, it's also easier for your brain to remain in that state. Once gameplay kicks off and you're in the zone, it's not going to care about the moving parts so long as they're well designed. What this doesn't work with is the games that strive to look real but fall just short. The games of a few years ago that were so close to looking perfect will now seem off, because they're nearly what your brain is used to seeing from top quality, but not quite. Every time that barrier between graphics and reality is shortened, every modern effort that attempted to emulate it prior is worse off for it. Nobody is going to mistake the Mr. Potato Head men from Oblivion with reality, and they were critiqued even upon release. And no matter how heavily you mod the Gamebryo engine, it's not going to compare with modern titles due to the limitations. Fortunately, the graphics it does have are well designed and representative after a fashion. The Witcher 3 can still look gorgeous, but if you've played Cyberpunk 2077 and gone back, you'll notice the animations are a little stiff, the facial expressions a little off, and you won't be able to stop noticing it. Old games generally don't have this problem, as the processing power of the machines of the time couldn't hope to render anything close to reality. They banked on the brains of their customers and they profited. a clear and concise colour palette, a less is more approach to how things appeared on your screen. The happy side effect of this limitation is that it didn't overwhelm the senses of the player like certain blood-splattered, constantly blinking heads-up displays do nowadays. So when I attack a monster with a sword in Might and Magic 2, there's nothing that any game from modern times can give me that would represent that better than a line of text informing me of the damage I inflicted with it. My mind is engaged and my brain is active. Rather than being shown the scene, it's the one painting it. And no processor or graphics card could ever conjure up a graphical equivalent to that feeling.